Thanks for the folks that came out tonight. Short presentation on one of my favorite topics, frugality and savings. So the type of people that are going to come out tonight or the type of people who are listening online probably don't actually need this, but it'll actually give you something to think about. And if you learn something here tonight, maybe the stories that I tell or the way I frame things might help you talk to your children, maybe, about these sort of concepts, as well as other folks that you know. Maybe not your best friends because they may not appreciate it, but you know, your greater circle of folks, if they're having trouble financially, maybe there's something that they can learn from this. Here's the topics we're going to talk about: frugality and why, right? Why not just spend all the money you make in your 20s? Sounds fun, am I right? And where to start, the do-it-yourself advantage, and then the compounding benefits, and then we will close for the day. Standard disclaimers of financial education presentations, so do your own homework before you take any action upon anything I mentioned in here. More disclaimer information is available at ankerstarwealth.com. All right, let's talk right into it. Frugality, that is a nice way of saying being cheap, right? So cheap has a negative connotation. Frugality is supposed to be more like the positive, like good habit patterns connotation. But when you look at the definition there, you know, living a deliberate and empowering lifestyle. You're like, BS, right? Because if you're not spending money, then what kind of lifestyle are you going to have? Well, you're balancing your lifestyle today with your future lifestyle. The phrase I like to use to folks is your future you be happy with how your present you is spending money. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't really care about that future you kind of guy, because I like spending my money right now. But that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about there are people that generally get like a dopamine hit from spending money. You've heard retail therapy. Some people use it as a joke. Some people do use it as actual therapy. But it's kind of expensive out there. So that's what we're going to talk about. And then the bottom, you know, money that you spend that doesn't make you happier is wasted. So you can think of all the things you spend money on in life, or maybe walk into your garage and swing that open. Those were good ideas at one point in time, but may not have necessarily given you the dopamine hit past the original purchase price. So things like that. All right. So the path of least resistance. So we're not set up in the U.S. as a capitalist society, and obviously I love that because we're in the investing business, so go capitalism. But you as the individual are marketed to from basically birth. And somebody has a good idea for your money at all point in time. It starts there in the top is the idea that everybody has to go to college. That's not true. There are plenty of career fields out there that pay very well, that have tech schools, or you can pick up on your own, being an entrepreneur, that sort of thing. But still, society, which is generally not your friend, says you need to go to college. And then when you go to college, well, if you don't have the money, hey, don't worry about it, because we've got this great program where we will issue a whole bunch of student loans. So you can literally hose yourself over for a decade plus by taking them up on this deal to improve yourself. So you spend some money, you go to college. If you get out of college and you're not in debt, you're already like a huge winner in life, so good for you. But everybody else, they have debt, and then you know what? You get marketed to as soon as you're out of college, because you're going to get a job, likely, right? That's the point. Then you're going to need to be able to get some transport to and from, so you're going to buy a car. You probably don't have car cash sitting in your hand, so you're going to walk into the bank or walk into the car dealership or whatever and get a car loan, so you have transportation. So then you're in debt yet again, and after you get that car, you know what? You're going to celebrate it. You're going to be like, yes, I have a car. I'm going to making this whole life thing. And then, of course, you want to go out with your friends, right? Because you're 23 and you have a job, and you have student debt and car debt, but yet you think you have earned the right to go out and party in the big city. Good for you. That's expensive. So maybe you get married or not, but if you have any experience with weddings, the one thing they're not is cheap. I will say, if you getting married is a great way to build wealth. It works best if you get married once and only once. Other versions of that scenario may lead you to Brokesville a lot later on. But say you get married. After you get married, of course, you have to move into a house because you can't have kids in an apartment. But society tells you this, so you go to the bank, you find a starter home, you get that, you go into debt again with a mortgage. Then, of course, the starter home, you outgrow that because your friends are living in a different neighborhood, so you got to move again to keep up with them because somebody cares about that. So you get a bigger house, and then after that, now you buy a whole bunch of cars and you get toys like bikes and things, or worse. So that's kind of the 10-year path of how to go from 20 on into being 30 and being really in a terrible financial situation. You don't have to do that. Nobody judges you in society. So you kind of free yourself from what everybody else thinks. But if you're left alone and listen to marketing, you are going to end up going down this path. And that's kind of independent of how much you're getting paid. If you have a nice high paying job, then fantastic, maybe you can afford this. If you don't have that, then you probably can't afford to go down this path without ending up in Brooksville. Around age 30 into 40 is kind of when people discover a word like I like to call adulting. So you finally have to grow up and leave the fraternity or sorority life behind that you may have lived through your 20s, and then you kind of have to figure things out. However, if you start earlier, or you think you leave college and you go, I'm going to always live either at or below my means. There's many programs out there. We're not really a get out of debt type firm, but we do talk about this. If when I talk to schools and people are like, what's the key to getting rich? And I'm like, well, it's one chart, right? You have your income line and your spending line. So if the income line is above the spending line, you're going to be rich. It just may take some time, but you'll get there undoubtedly. If you spend above the income line, well, you're just hosed. So you stop doing that. And there's only two ways, right? You have to stop the spending or increase the income. And humans being as optimistic as they are, you're like, well, I will always make more money. I say, well, hope so. Don't look at the U.S. government for those two lines, income and spending. Not the best example. Okay, so how to do this? A lot of folks say, I say the experts, right, say your habit patterns are built by the time you're 5 or 6. So if you have kids that age, go give them $1 and see what they do with it. If they spend it, if they're like looking like, let's go buy something, well, you've got a spender on your hands, which may be a long life for you. If they're like, yes, and they go try to tuck it in their piggy bank, it's like, okay, well, they're a saver, right? So those habit patterns you develop at an early age, and pretty much that's what happens. I've got 2 girls in college right now. We've always talked money. Every situation is different, so for your family dynamic, but I do think having the conversation is valuable, even if one of them looks at you like, you're obviously crazy. But, it's just like at least talking about it gets them familiar with the topic. Allie goes to Alabama and is in a sorority, which is a very expensive venture. And a lot of the girls out there in the sorority have their parents' credit cards and kind of spend like there's no limit. And maybe that's the situation they're in, but that's not the world that most of us live in. Right, so we didn't do that. We went with like an allowance type thing so you could have your own money to be able to actually spend. So lights are playing tricks in here. I like it. So sustainable habits. So that's when you get out of college and get that first job, there's going to be a lot of things you want. You're going to want a fancier car. You're going to want to redo your outfit. Some of those are investments in your future. Some of them are not. Work outfits and stuff, you may have to do that, right? If you are in a professional environment, you may have to buy a new wardrobe, which is expensive. As far as where you live and stuff, you may not be able to afford to live in the city where you're working. You may have to live on the edges and commute in. There's all kinds of options only you can make. But whatever your salary is, try to spend less than that. We don't talk a lot about stress and money, but I will say that when you are living the rock star lifestyle, you're not stressed. You're actually living the dream, if you will. It's when that adulting thing kicks in. So whenever that is for you, late 20s, early 30s, 40s, 50, I won't have everybody throw out their own number. But when the chickens come home to roost here and you realize the amount of debt that you have, you're going to be pretty stressed out about it. So one way to stay out of that stress is don't let yourself get there in the first place. Easier said than done, for sure. But knowing that it's out there and having the conversation and trying to get on the right side of that earlier will be a lot better. And then the last one, if you develop kind of frugal habits, if you will, and you get a little dopamine hit from like saving money or using coupons, there are people that do get that. Or getting the deal. I like to say that Irene is frugal by sport. It's like she's a very competitive type person, and yeah, she just wants the deal. Right? Not that you couldn't pay full price for it, it's a deal. So that will lead to, when you go to retire, if you kind of build those habit patterns over a lifetime and you're not used to all the fancy things in life, then retirement's a lot cheaper because you just kind of don't need that stuff. You go, that's stuff, that's not for me. So if you can manage this correctly, or not correctly, manage it cheaper according to you throughout your lifetime, you actually don't need as much money for retirement. So where do you start? A lot of this comes from Mr. Money Mustache, which is a famous now writer out there on financial He talks personal finance, so we wouldn't normally talk about investing, right? It's like you get to the point where you have a whole bunch of cash and we invest it for you to make more. That's kind of our specialty. He's more along the lines of helping the everyday household try to get by and get to the point where, you know, they're cutting expenses. So the first one is housing, choosing where you live. So if you know, we're here in Austin, right? So that is, it used to be kind of cheap. Well, now if you want to be cheap in the Austin area, you have to go, you know, 50 miles out of town. It used to be like 20 miles out of town. When we looked for a house here, we were like, oh, Round Rock's well outside of town because it's like 15 miles. And well, the city grows up and kind of consumes you. But when you choose your housing, you want to make sure you can afford it, so you're not house broke. If you've been there, you know exactly what that means. If you're not there, if you've never been there, you're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. If you buy this big, beautiful house, how could you be house broke? It's like, haha, that's somebody who's gone down that path. But yeah, you want to kind of tie that with your workplace, right? So you think of your own financial engine. I'm making income, I have to go here, or maybe I only have to go there a couple days a week. But if you do have to go into the office, think how far that is. There's an energy cost of you having to, you know, drive to and from, or take transit or whatever, and there's also a time cost, which can be even a worse penalty you have to pay. But if you do live somewhere near where you work, that also helps you cut down your transportation costs. He talks about living the life of a turtle, right? Turtles live within like 50 yards of where they're born, right? Works pretty good, pretty inexpensive. So that's how to think of that. Transportation, I have always said that if you, and including my two girls, which have their own cars, right, that dad bought for them, so laugh and mock me, please. But it is 100% cheaper in almost all situations for you just to Uber where you need to go. Legit. And you're like, oh, that's BS. It's like, nope, it's not. Do the math. Factor in insurance, factor in operating costs, and then the price of the car. And if you're taking out a car loan, it's like, that could be the future. So I don't know how the world will play out, but I wouldn't be surprised if Uber, Lyft, Waymo, Zoox, if you've been in one of those vehicles, robo-taxis, I could see that being the normal. And then you know, instead of you owning a car being a luxury item, it's like you're the idiot that has a whole bunch of money that you're going to dump into just having your own car. And there's all kinds of ride sharing things out there, if you guys have seen it, where, you know, you can, if your car's in the driveway, you can make it available, and it can now become its own little like self-driving Uber and stuff. It's like, so crazy. But look, think about your transportation costs. People are like, oh, I'm not going to ride public transportation. I'm like, well, don't get over it. Don't get too proud, right? I mean, works just fine. Groceries and food, there you can buy the same stuff at Walmart that you can buy at Trader Joe's, Sprouts, Whole Foods. Yep, argue with me, let's go. But it's the same stuff, right? And you can play a whole lot more if you just like shopping with the weird, I mean, if they're with the rich people that shop at Whole Foods, right? Okay, maybe you say you don't necessarily care for the Walmart experience. We'll go to Target, you pay a little bit more for each item. But it's cool, right? But either way, think about how you source your stuff, and you know, there's generally cheaper options, or you can have groceries delivered. Not DoorDash. That's an expensive way to get a $35 burrito from Taco Bell. And of course, you know, the whole eating out thing, now that I live a life where we're on the road a lot, so we are eating out a lot, that's very expensive. And with the tipping craze, where you're tipping everyone regardless of what they do, and anything below 20%, and you're risky, you might get in fisticuffs with the waiter or waitresses. So it's, you know, think about all that money that you're spending versus doing it at home. And then lastly, I could not think of it earlier, and I Googled it, and I didn't come up with the name, but who runs the ads for the subscription trackers? Anybody remember? If you think of it, yell it out. That you can, ironically, pay a subscription for a app, is it?
Rocket Money.
Rocket Money, thank you. Yeah, so you pay a subscription to find out that you're paying a whole bunch of subscriptions, and then you can, in theory, cut them. If you have a house full of kids, good luck, because I do believe if you cut anything, they turn around and resubscribe at a worse rate. I don't know. I've given up. They win. Maybe someday they'll be on their own. But until now, I just pay for all. But those can be very expensive if you're subscribing to Hulu to see Love is Blind or whatever your particular show is, Love Island. Subscriptions have definitely entered the villa, if you get the reference. All right, do it yourself as far as fixing things. I am not mechanical. I pilot for the Air Force, I was kind of curious as to how like the airplane works and how to fix it and stuff, and I was told earlier on, hey Joey, come on in. I was told early on you need to focus on employing the airplane, not how to fix it. That's somebody else's job. So that can lead to, if you're in a high-paying job, it actually mathematically works to have somebody else do all your stuff at home. But it can be very satisfying to fix things around the house. With YouTube now, even I, who am not mechanically inclined, can figure out how to fix things around the house unless it takes like some advanced tools or stuff I don't have. So you can save a lot of money that way by fixing things on your own. Even I can do it. Remember the old, even a caveman can do it sort of thing. But you can get joy from that. And then lastly, the financial independence ladder. So if you build these habit patterns to where you stay below your income level, and every time in the military, this was kind of the theory I subscribe to, is in the military they always want to keep you in, right? So about every time you're faced with a decision, they will give you a little bit of a pay raise. So every time you get a pay raise, whether it's military or in the civilian world, if you try to save half of it, right? Use half of it to increase your savings, the other half you can increase your lifestyle. Just kind of spend it because you're moving up the ladder, right? That can help you always stay on the right side of that equation. I will say from personal experience that I always wanted to have a lot of money, be rich, if you will. I was weird in high school because I was vocalizing that I wanted to be a millionaire. I thought that would be a good goal, and people thought that was funny. Don't care who's laughing now. But yeah, so but trying to move up the ladder and save money, that's okay. But the sooner you can keep that ratio correct, the sooner you can go to investing, right? Which is kind of what we do. That's our bread and butter. But you have to kind of earn the right to invest. So if somebody walks in and says, yeah, it's like, hey, I've heard great things about your firm. I'm really aggressive on how I invest, and I've got $50,000 to get started. And it's like, that's fantastic. Let's sit down and talk. And then when you start talking about, okay, well, they have $50,000, but they also have all this debt and stuff. It's kind of like, we kind of need to focus on killing off the debt before we get into the investing game. You have to earn your way there. But certainly, so when you think of all this debt that you have coming out of college, or cars or houses or whatever it is, you talk about good and bad debt, not the topic for today, but you're costing your ability to invest. And that's the real upside, is when you get to, this is a QR code here if anybody wants to hit it with their phone. All four of these slide, right? It's just the time value of money chart. So if anything, if you're trying to have this conversation with the kids, first of all, you'd rather, like smash your head against the wall or whatever, but you're trying your best, because Steve said you should probably have this conversation. So you go in and you get all fired up and you're like, today they're going to listen. Okay, maybe. Anyhow, this can be an eye-opener, right? Because until this point, they're like, oh my gosh, I would rather do anything on the sun other than listen to your voice one more second. But if you get this far, or you start here, these little slider is kind of like, okay, so say you can, $1,000 a month, you talk about, what you might be able to save on a year, talk about the interest rate, and show them that time value of money. So these kind of slide. And I will say my personal experience, and I'll close with this, or to questions, so think about your questions, is I had a math teacher I had him 2 years in a row in my middle school, because our school was kind of small, so you had the same teacher sometimes. And he sold insurance in addition to teaching math at school. And he came over to our house and was trying to sell my parents insurance, and they said, nope, insurance bad, right? Pay premiums, don't need insurance. But he did bring this time value money chart, which is, I was sitting there looking at this, and he's talking about, okay, you save this much and how much it's exponential over your lifetime. And he said, he goes, this is literally the eighth wonder of the world. It is purely magic. You just have to stick to it, and you will be as rich as you want to be. And I was like, listening. So I've always thought about that. I see it now. I've seen it in action for decades, and I can attest that it does work. But that can sometimes be the thing that trips somebody into thinking, okay, this will lead to where I want to be. And then you say, okay, so here's the chart. Now think of, if you can even imagine yourself 10, 20, 30 years down the road, you'd rather have a lot of money than to be as broke as you are now. So if you don't change your habit patterns, then you carry your brokenness into your 50s and 60s, which may not be as fun as you think. So, all right, I will close with that and then open it up for questions. Here's your team. As always, reach out if you want more information. So any questions from the crowd today?
I got one. So you always hear the financial gurus talking about cut out your daily Starbucks is the way to save thousands a year. What's your take on that kind of approach?
Well, that certainly is an expensive habit pattern, but I will say you kind of need to focus on the large stuff. So if you kind of get the things on this slide right, you can afford to have what I call the guilty pleasure. And we all have those, right? I have some sitting in the driveway. It's my weakness. But but as far as whether it's Starbucks or having the latest tech or the iPhone or whatever, there are some things that you want that kind of like motivate you. It's like, so I work hard, I'm doing my own life, so I want things. If Starbucks is that thing for you, then have your Starbucks every day. Don't ever sit down with a calculator and calculate what that's costing you, because then you might get depressed again. But yeah, you can have guilty pleasures. You just don't want everything through from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed to fall under guilty pleasure land, because you'll run out of money. So good question. All right, anything else?
You mentioned, you can see it in your kids at an early age, the ones that are spenders, the ones that are savers by their behavior. I mean, if you're frugal when you're young, is it typically, are you going to be frugal when you're older? I mean, Scrooge McDuck comes to mind.
Yeah, right, the counting the money duck. So one thing I do deal with quite a bit, because obviously that generally folks find a wealth management firm in their 40s and 50s, right? That's when, for whatever reason, the numbers get big enough, they don't like the volatility anymore, retirement's like a thing, so that's kind of when we start having a conversation. The reason I bring that up is because, and I'll use my parents as an example, is it's kind of like in the workplace. If you've ever heard the what got you here won't get you there mentality, right? So you started a firm no matter what your career is and you're kind of kicking butt. That doesn't mean you can manage the place, right? Those are different skill sets. And people don't change, right? We're not very good at that, right? We either need, generally people need a trigger event to have any realistic change in their life. So the reason I bring that up is so if you are a saver, where your dopamine hit is like staring at your app with Schwab app with your money going crazy like it did today. You can look today. If you've been looking away, you should really look today, especially Bitcoin. Thanks for bringing that up. But certainly you can get to a point to where you get so much dopamine off of that and the building wealth thing that you can lose fact of the maximizing life piece of maximizing wealth. So it is a struggle. My parents have kind of always thought they were broke, right? They're military. But their portfolio ballooned later in life, largely because they had their son manage it. That's a little advertisement for me. But a traditional path is to manage it towards you go almost all entirely conservative when you enter retirement, and then you live like another 30, 40 years, which there's a lot of upside there. But the same factors that they were looking at, they still have trouble spending money now. Right, because they were, there's different phases of retirement, and there's the go-go, the slow-go, and the no-go. Everybody gets to the no-go if you live long enough, right, where you just stare at the TV, CNN or Fox, your choice, and get mad, yell at the kids that you see outside, whatever. We're all going there. So it's like to get there, you want to make sure you spend your money along the way. So it can be tough for people to change those habit patterns. And I won't say you're a bad person if you're trying to make as much money as possible, but just realize that if you are in that mode for most of your life, it's tough to get yourself to spend money. And I can easily say that still first class tickets aren't something that I can really spend 10x for sitting 20 feet further in front of the airplane that's going to the same location. That's just me though. And so far I haven't been called out by Irene on that. All right, any other questions for today? All right, thank you so much for listening. Be frugal out there. We'll talk to you later.